Hello, friend, and welcome to Journey to Well, the podcast. I am so honored to have you here. Journey to Well was birthed from a deep craving to cultivate tribe. We're not created to do this healing journey or this life journey alone. In fact, it was Bessel van der Kolk who expertly shared healing happens in the presence of an empathetic witness. That is the heart of this podcast and my business, to witness. You can expect a plethora of conversations on nervous system regulation, breath work, human design and astrology, cycle alignment, energy and spirituality work, and so much more. We are all on a journey back home to ourselves, rediscovering an innate power within, and I am thrilled to take this journey to well with you. Enjoy today's episode and be well, my friend. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Jenn today. First of all, welcome back to the podcast. We took a little hiatus. I don't know that you are following my podcast journey, but this summer came and I'm like, I just can't, I don't have the energy. I don't have that pull to have all of these podcast recordings. So then in typical Manny Jenn fashion, I scheduled 3 podcast recordings in the next week and a half. So we're getting back to it. But I am so excited to have this conversation with Jenn. She is another Instagram connection that I made. And I told you I wanted to share this story before I let you introduce yourself. So I think I was just on a walk and I was really pondering. I'm like, I need some support. Should I go see a therapist? Should I go hire a human design coach? Should I hire a coach? What do I need? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really for a lot of reasons, I don't feel like I really need therapy right now, but I don't know if I need a strict human design coach. So literally that afternoon, I'm like, okay, well, one of the things that I love to do is just search whatever I'm interested in. If it's human design or breath work or cycle alignment, I'll search people on Instagram occasionally. And I'm searching Instagram, I think I just typed in human design. I don't know what I typed in. And you come up and I look at your profile and it's therapist, former therapist, and human design coach. I'm like, of course I find you. And then you have this wonderful program, which we can talk about probably towards the end, doing cycle alignment work too in tandem with human design. So basically, everything that I do, you do in a beautiful, different way than I would do. And I'm so excited to connect with you. I was so excited to connect with you. And I'm really excited to have this conversation about human design and relationships and how human design can kind of give us this navigation towards discovering compatibility, discovering how we can relate, and not just partnerships. I don't know, we didn't actually talk about this beforehand, but I always say relationships in relation to everyone that you come in contact with, not just those romantic relationships. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. This is Jenn. She's a 3/5 emotional authority projector, which is fun. We have the 3 line in common. Otherwise, we have nothing in common. And she's an Aquarius sun, Aries moon, Taurus rising. I like to throw that out because when I'm listening to podcasts and I know oh, she's a 1/3, or oh, this person is a Manny Jenn, it's fun to point out and pick out parts of my life that I really align with, and then parts where I'm like, oh, I never saw that perspective as a manifesting generator. So that's why I like to share that. But without further ado, Jenn, welcome. Please share your intro, whatever you want to share about yourself. I was joking with you earlier before we hit record. I like to let people introduce themselves because I want to see what box you want to put yourself in today and how you want to present yourself on this specific podcast, because we are always changing. So you're not putting yourself in a steel trap. But who is Jenn? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the combo of human design and relationships.
So beautiful. Thank you, Hannah. And I feel like you introed me in some of the beautiful basic ways. So thank you for saving my undefined throat from repeating. So yeah, I have been an art therapist, a mental health clinician for over 10 years. Human design found me over 4 years ago, of
Mm.
course, when I needed it most.
Mm.
It's kind of a pivotal transition in my life where I needed to kind of figure out, like, what do I want to do? What is the next chapter?
Mm.
I had wanted to build a successful private practice, and I did. And then I kind of hit this wall and was like, well, what do I do now? So yeah, human design found me and I used it for my personal exploration coming out of burnout, right? I was trying to live as a Manny Gen, as a generator because of the conditioning. I was raised by a manifesting generator, single mom. So I was really burned out because of hustle culture, priding myself on working 12-hour days, which
Mm.
is like so absurd now because I'm like, I can only work 4 hours a day. So yeah, I implemented it with all of my clients and just amazing transformation. And as the world shifted and things started to change, I realized I did not want to be a therapist anymore because it started to feel like a steel trap. Like it really,
Mm.
I have to do these things in this way. Otherwise, I'm not necessarily stepping out of bounds of ethics, but this is why I have this license. So it's really, this whole time has been a journey into the coaching field, into not hiding behind the therapist like blank wall that we need to, of not, being transparent and sharing ourselves. So
Yeah.
it's been a wild journey. So, yeah, I call myself an energetic alignment coach. That's
Mm.
what feels really resonant because I love helping individuals, especially women business owners, find alignment through human design and the deconditioning. I love helping people decondition, letting go of what they're not to really step into their power. And a
Mm.
lot of this is about relationships, right?
Mm.
Relationships self, and especially boundaries and communication and understanding our energy, and also understanding the energy of those around us so that we can either communicate better or hold healthy boundaries. Or I mean, gosh, there's so much to explore there.
I know. Every time I do these podcasts, my mind goes in like, whew, a million different directions. I'm like, where do I want to start? I do want to eventually, I don't want to start here, but I do want to eventually loop back around to parenting and learning your parents' human design because fun fact, I guess, I find it fascinating. I'm actually the only my mom and my dad are both projectors and my sister is a reflector. So I'm the
Wow.
only like sacral authority in my family. I do have to look at my stepdad's chart, but my stepdad didn't come into my life until later in life. But my sister and I have actually recorded a podcast about being raised by a projector because I feel like, manifesting generators and generators make up 70% of the population. So chances are, probability wise, you were raised by either a generator or a Manny-Gen. And the fact that I'm a Manny-Gen raised by a projector, I'm like, there's so much there and there's so much conditioning there that I'm just now starting to work through. So anyway, I want to get there eventually. But what I want to start with, and maybe you don't have an answer to this, I don't know, but when you're working with clients in relationships, or when you meet, let's say like you meet a new friend and you want to begin to learn their human design chart and their energy type and kind of who they are and how your energies are compatible or how your energies may shift, where do you personally start in the chart?
um, I do a lot at once, actually. So this happens to me all the time. Whenever I make a new friend, in the dating life, it's like, I need your chart. So I definitely look at the type, right? I'm going to be like, okay, essentially what centers, right? I look at the centers. What centers do you have defined, which essentially shows their type, right? Are you a sacral?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a non-sacral? Are you an emotional authority? Do you not have that defined solar plexus? So definitely looking at the centers. And then I really like to look at the hanging gates, where we both have the same hanging gates and where we have electromagnetic channels.
Mm.
Because that's where the sparks happen. That's where the magic happens, especially if we have an electromagnetic center, like that's really exciting. So once I look at that, which, it takes me like 1 minute to look at all of that, then I'm like, okay, stop
Yeah.
and actually get to know this person.
Hmm.
Because it's one thing to look at a chart, but then, we can't always see the conditioning within the chart. And especially, I feel like just as a 3-5 projector, I really see people's potential, and
Yeah.
especially more so in intimate relationships. Like, I do not want to fall in love with someone's potential. It's
Yeah.
really, where are you at now, meeting them where they're at. So I try not to get ahead of myself really diving into their chart, because if they're so conditioned, what I see in their chart may be a completely different person than I'm
Hmm.
getting face to face.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. For those of us that are on early in the journey of human design, what is a defined center? And then what does that look like in a chart? And then what is a hanging gate?
Yeah, great question. So define center, those centers, those shapes, right? There's 9 centers within the chart. A defined center is one that's colored in. So I like seeing where they have that fixed, reliable energy moving through that center. So like the spleen, I like to look at, are they conscious about their body? Do they have instincts? Are they connected to their intuition? Or the root center too, is that undefined? Is it white? Might stress be getting the better of them?
Mm-hmm.
And then hanging gates, those gates are the numbers. And when those numbers have a color around them and a color stemming from that number, but not all the way to the other side, it only goes halfway. It's not a full channel, right? It goes from center to center. It's just one gate hanging there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why it's called a hanging gate. So I like to look at those and then compare to my hanging gates to see, are they the same hanging gates? Like, cool, we can really understand each other on this level. Or are they hanging gates that connect, right? Opposites attract, and that's where the spark and the electromagnetic magic happens.
Mm-hmm. You're actually someone that reminded me of that during one of our group calls, and then I went and looked at my my partners. I'm like, where do we have opposite hanging gates? It was fun. It was really fun, and I agree. I agree. Looking at the chart, I think what I like to do, and maybe this is part of Manny, Jen, and me, but is look at someone's chart when I first meet them and then get to know them. And then I like kind of do this dance of like going back and forth and going back and forth. And when we're having this conversation, especially if it's someone that doesn't necessarily know about human design or doesn't know a lot about human design, I like to just quick like bring up their chart and be like, okay, so this, and then almost have a conversation around it, and then you get to explore their conditioning too. But I like the point that you brought up about getting to know someone. There's all these funny reels on Instagram of like when, in the dating world, like, oh, what's your sun sign? And then we have all of these ideas about that person, which may or may not be true. And I do think that there's a difference between astrology and human design. But being mindful to really look at the person, not the potential of the person, not the potential of the chart or what the chart exactly says. I think that's a good place to start. I like that.
Yeah, I love how you describe that dance, because that's really what I do with clients, right? Like, what we've been
Mm,
talking about so far is much more in my personal life, right? When I meet friends or business connections or dating, any of that, or extended family too. I just
mm.
got someone's chart. Oh, it was an old client. Because it doesn't get to happen so much anymore where I know someone so well before I get their chart.
Ah, yes,
It's
yeah,
like, I have your chart. Cool. Now let me get to
yeah,
know you. So
yeah.
it was really nice to have the reverse. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, definitely with clients, I love, what are you talking about? I'm very intuitive, my defined spleen. When I work with clients, just kind of get the hit of, oh, I hear this gate, or you're really talking about this. Let's look at that center and see,
Mm,
is it in alignment? Do we need to decondition here?
mm-hmm.
So I love that beautiful flow and dance of talking about, whether it be mental health or behaviors or boundaries or whatever we're discussing, and then
Mhm.
applying it to the chart or seeing where the chart, essentially your energetic blueprint comes in handy to help guide you through that.
Mm, right, because it can, and that's one of the beautiful things about human design is that we can really apply it to any and every area of our lives. And on this podcast, at least thus far, we've talked a lot about relationships and just have kind of that undertone of relationships. So, one of my questions, or one thing that I'm wondering, is the compatibility aspect. Like, are there areas in your chart that we can look at to, again, like friends, romantic relationships? It doesn't have to be all romantic relationships, but what areas of the chart would point to describing or showing compatibility?
Yeah, I think in the most basic sense, like I mean, I love getting nitty-gritty into the game,
Mm-hmm.
into all of that stuff, but to kind of take a big step back and start at the basics, it really is the type, right? Which
Okay.
ultimately is those centers. So, and I talk about this whenever I do like relationship readings or when I lead my compatibility workshop. Like there are so many nuances and variables here. So I don't think like, yes, human design itself can be black and white, right? It's this or
Mm,
you have it or you don't. But when it comes to compatibility, like there are so many variables because everything is a spectrum. So it really depends, like, where are you along each and every spectrum of in a lower vibration or in that higher vibration
okay.
that make things even more magnetic or they can make them more repelling. Right. When I
Mm,
was burned out as a projector, I was consumed by bitterness. And I even notice this sometimes when I go out. Like, I am not a manifester in any aspect, in any quality, but man, like I can be really, really repelling when I go
mm,
out in public and don't want anything.
yeah.
So, in that sense, when I'm consumed in my not self theme, I'm not going to attract invitations. I'm not going to, light someone else up or be the lighthouse that they're looking for as a projector because I myself am not in that place.
Mm,
So, just that example that, it's so nuanced. Like,
yeah.
there's so many aspects, and that's why I love exploring it. It really excites me.
Yeah, yeah. I really love this self and not self theme, and good point bringing up like if we're kind of living in that not self theme, which again, I try to keep this very beginner friendly because sometimes I listen to podcasts and I'm like, this is so like over my head. So I'm gonna bring it down for those of you that are listening that maybe are just beginning this human design journey. Let's remind ourselves the not self theme. I like to call it like we're living out of alignment. This is a really great way that our bodies, coming from a sacral authority, that our bodies are showing us that we're not living in alignment. So the not self theme of generators and Gens is frustration, the or not alignment. For me, I literally used before I even knew about human design. I literally used I'm like the word frustration. Like I would say, I'm so frustrated right now. And now every time I hear myself thinking it or saying out loud, I'm like, oh, let's think about this. Let's look at what's going on. So the not self theme of projectors is bitterness that you just shared. The not self theme of manifestors is anger. I don't even know the not self theme of reflectors. What is that? I forget.
Disappointment.
Disappointment. Yeah. So using those words, and I do like to point out, especially with Manny Jen, sometimes are not self themes. Sometimes we feel anger. So it's not always frustration. Sometimes it is anger because we are that hybrid. So those are the not self themes. Just as you're listening and moving on. So I'm curious when we're talking about compatibility and when we're talking about like meeting new people, let's just kind of stick with the theme of like new relationships, whatever it is, and moving through those like newer stages of any kind of relationship. How can we use our chart and the chart of our new engagement in creating more ease, in creating more flow in the relationship, or maybe creating more invitation. I really like the word invitation, even though I'm not a projector. I use invitation all the time.
Yeah, and I really think it comes down to the basics of the type, right? For the
Sure.
strategy. So, as a projector, knowing that someone's a projector and they are waiting for invitations, to offer those invitations.
Okay.
And when I meet generators or Manny gens, I try to be really mindful to give them something to respond to, right? Gens and Manny,
Mm.
their strategy to finding alignment, to living in alignment, to being in their self signature theme of satisfaction is responding. So a lot of times, especially with my undefined throat, I like won't say anything. And then they don't say anything. And then we're in this awkwardness. And it's like, oh, I'm sitting here waiting for an invitation. They're sitting here waiting for something to respond to. Like, okay, this is going to take a while. So I do honor that, like, I can reflect things back. I do have the channel of initiating. So I try to use that to start something up or
Okay.
share an idea for my open ajna. Um, so yeah, I try to be really mindful to help the other person with their strategy. And
Mm.
I think the other point of this, and especially for anyone new, I feel like I just rattled off a really long sentence before. But human design is its own new language. So it's really learning this language of the strategies of the self and not self theme. Because also when I'm talking with gens and Manny gens, I try to bring in the satisfaction. And especially with sacral, like, does that light you up? Like, ask the other huge thing that I've had to learn from being an emotional authority. Like, how does that make you feel? Tell me about
Yeah.
the emotions, and getting this like deer in headlight look from all the sacral authority. Be like, ask them yes, no questions. So that's another huge piece that I've learned within relationships. When I'm talking with the sacral, I
Yeah.
need to ask them yes, no questions.
Yeah, I love that, and I use that in my coaching business is looking, and you're right. I mean, obviously, apply this to relationships. Is look at just in general, and I want to know if you agree with this or not. In general, Gens generators, because they have the sacral authority, do really well with the yes no questions. And manifestors too, or no? Are manifestors better with open-ended questions or yes no questions?
Hmm. I think it depends. In a way, in my mind, sometimes I think of manifestors as like these big, mysterious people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
they make up 8% of the world. A lot of times, for a while, I was meeting so many manifestors in full alignment. And they were like, yeah, I live in peace. And, oh, that's great. And then I hear all these almost like horror stories about manifestors not living in alignment and being consumed by energy and just initiating things and having really a lot of difficulties in relationships because they're not following their strategy of informing. So,
Yeah.
and with being, non-sacrals not having that energy, their own energetic cycles that they ride of, being in initiation and then being resting, and then if they're an emotional authority too, to write that, like,
Mm.
about cycles, uh,
Hmm.
I find manifestors very, very interesting. So I
Me
don't know if
too.
I have an exact answer for that. I
Okay.
mean, ultimately, they don't have the fixed, reliable sacral for yes, no. So it's not like they'll get a sacral response, but
Mhm.
they still have that sacral energy. So
Mhm.
they can still use it.
And I think we need to think about the spleen too. I really align the spleen and the sacral in a lot of different ways. But what I was kind of getting at was Manny Gens generators do really well with yes no questions. Projectors do really well with those open-ended questions. So even just simple things of like I always share with my friends the simplest thing, like the simplest way for me to invite practicing this in your relationship, in whatever relationship is, look up your relationships chart, look at that person's chart. And if they have that, if they're a mani gen or generator versus if they're a projector or reflector, or I'm going to also say manifestor just for the sake of this conversation. And then use food. Use food as invitations to create this dialogue switch. So maybe instead of, if you learn that your friend or your partner is a Manny Gen, asking them, rather than asking them, hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? Asking them, hey, do you want Italian tonight or do you want tacos tonight? Or do you want to cook at home or do you want to go out? And having those like very defined yes no questions versus if you have a projector, like, hey, what do you want for dinner? And even maybe even more so with an emotional authority, I don't know. And then allow them to talk it out and work through their own process of like, I don't know, I kind of want Italian, but I had Italian last night and I don't really feel like something heavy and I don't really feel like something warm. Maybe we should do something cold. Hey, salad places sound good. Let's just go to the store and make a salad. Like that's how I feel like the conversation might go, but
Yeah.
allowing that and then playing around with that in your relationships and or sharing that to your partner, like as a Manny Jen, yeah, asking me what I want for dinner tonight. I what I learned with myself is then I go through my own yes no dialogue. So like if you were to ask me what do you want for dinner, then I'm like, do I want pasta? No. Do I want a salad? No. Do I want tacos? Yeah. And then I'll like go through it and then I'll speak, yeah, hey, maybe we should do tacos. But that's a lot of like inner dialogue going on.
But I think the biggest part about all of this within relationships is really understanding what we are, how we work.
Mm.
You understand that you work that way.
Hmm.
So when we can understand who we are and who we are not, it can
Yeah.
really help us. And then when we have that level of communication, right? So, like, if you and I were going out to dinner, it would be so great for me to know that you're a Manny Jen, that you need those
Yeah.
yes no questions, that that's how you work. Because if you're asking me yes no questions and I'm asking you open ended questions, like, we probably would end up in a fight and not actually a wonderful dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. Or not like doing what you really want, like then we can get into I mean, what I use, like I use the tool like Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 3 and like there's this huge like people pleaser and just coming from that like relational center of I feel the yes or the no, but I will say, "Oh, sure, like we can go." So learning that too. Is there anywhere in human design like do you understand what I'm saying where that would come up in human design and learning
And you
that?
know, that's a great question. And I have limited understanding of Enneagram. A friend of
Sure.
mine is super into it. So, I found mine out years ago. I'm a one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I see a lot of similarities. Like, as she was talking about her being a nine, she's a sacral generator and her wings, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense and aligns with your human design. So there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a similarity there, but I'm not sure if there's specific aspects of, if you're this Enneagram number, you can see it in this way and this way within human design. I haven't found
Yeah.
specific correlations. I think just because Enneagram is a bit more generalized, whereas I find human design can be so specific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think with Enneagram 2, we're getting in, or I'm sorry, just in this like aspect, we're kind of getting into the conditioning because I
mm,
don't think that we're really, I think, either with Enneagram or with human design, we can look at like where maybe we have those people pleaser tendencies that come to play. And especially with my knowledge of Enneagram, it would make sense that we have this like people pleaser or fawn response if you're in that triad of what is it, 2 3 4, I think, where you because relationships are so important to you, so you have that people pleaser, you want to like do anything to protect that relationship. But to me, we are getting more into that conversation of conditioning and deconditioning. So let's move there. Oh, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
that just makes so much sense. And I love that you just said that the Enneagram can show us, like, shed more light on our conditioning. Because, like I said before, human design doesn't necessarily say that. It's more of comparing, like, here's where you're supposed to be. Are you there? Like,
Yeah.
when I first learned about an Enneagram, I was like, okay, line one, perfectionist. I need things this way, type A. And like, yes, I am, but that's much more of like my not self design, like my shadow.
Mm,
Um, to just like get into the nitty gritty here, I have gate 58, conscious and unconscious, that gate of joy. It is a hanging gate. So I fall into the shadow of the other side of
mm,
perfectionism. So when I discovered that in my human design, and with 58 being conscious and unconscious, it's something for me to move through and to heal in this lifetime. I was like, okay, how can I move away from perfectionism
yeah.
to find that joy? So that's why I really haven't resonated much with Enneagram since then, because I don't, in some ways, like, I don't want to be that type.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be the emotional projector and conscious reflector, which in my mind is not an Enneagram one.
Interesting. I'm very curious because I closely follow. I have a friend that does IFS.
Yeah.
If I'm sure you know that IFS and Enneagram. So I've been closely following that
Yeah.
and human design, and I'm very curious to see how Enneagram and human design can, instead of have like the polarity, find alignment, because I'm curious and I don't know enough about Enneagram, so I can't speak on this, but I would be curious to explore the aspects of the Enneagram one that you align with, because with Enneagram and with astrology, it's and with human design, let's be honest, but I understand human design more and you do too, so it's maybe easier for us. But it's very difficult for me to say like, oh, I'm a Leo, sun and moon. I have a lot of Leo, I have a lot of fire in my chart. But then when we talk about like the stereotypes of what makes up a Leo, it's like, oh, they're very dramatic and they like all of the attention on them. And I'm like, whoa, that is not me at all. I actually avoid drama at all costs. And I don't like all the attention on me. When I'm in a large group of people, I shrink up and and I'm just like, I'm just here to listen and I'm just here to be. But then you put me in, in this situation, or even just the fact that I have a podcast, right? So it's like that flavor of attention, I guess you could say, like it's a different flavor. So not just looking at it stereotypically, but as we explore more of astrology, or as we would explore more of Enneagram, I wonder if there would be different pieces of it where you're like, oh, that makes sense. I really do think that Enneagram points out conditioning so well. And like our invitations for us to look at how to decondition. And then you can use your human design chart, right? And see what aligns with you and where you get that pull as a manager.
Makes so much sense. I've seen a lot of people on Instagram doing human design and Enneagram, and I'm like,
Oh.
it's an interesting combination. I wonder, why they chose those two modalities, but
Mm,
we all choose our own modalities for reasons. So yeah, that would be really interesting.
yeah.
And I just have to say it here because it's become somewhat of a soapbox that I get on, because I did not resonate with astrology for the longest time, and only in
Mm,
the last year have I actually gotten more into astrology, because having the understanding of human design and how astrology fits into human design
yeah.
has really helped. So, and so interesting. I have a friend who's a Leo who's exactly like you. So I'm wondering if you both have the same birthday,
Interesting.
because why I didn't like astrology was because exactly how you described it. You're your sun sign, you're this, you're that. It's like, no, I didn't really resonate with
Mm,
astrology. And of course, we can talk about like tropical versus Vedic system and all of that. Um, but when we look at human design, you have each zodiac sign, and within that is 5 or 6 different human design gates. So
mm,
it really need to look at the gate, at your human design conscious sun, because that's your specific
yeah.
astrology sign tendency. And that's what makes up 70% of your energy. So
Yeah.
you really need to look and see what that is, because I mean, So my conscious sun is gate 41, the gate
Hmm.
of anticipation, or that's the gene key gift. So when I first looked at that, I was like, okay, like I kind of
Yeah.
get it. I see how it is an aspect of Aquarius, but when I started really utilizing anticipation and bringing that into my life, I
Mm.
don't want to do things and well, first I had to become aware of like, what is that feeling of anticipation? Like, what does this gate mean to me, for me in my
Yeah.
life? And then it was, okay, how can I bring this? How can I use this to find alignment? And like it was just this whole, I feel like I had to do some like years of therapy with myself. Like, okay, we need to decondition from the thought of like, you can't have this, you don't deserve it, you're not worthy of it, to like, no, it gets to be like this and really let things build, especially as
Yeah.
an emotional authority. I can be indecisive. I am apathetic. Like, there are a lot of things that I just don't care about. And that
Yeah.
bothers a lot of people, but that's who I am.
Yeah.
But with this conscious sun of anticipation, like
Yeah.
that's what I'm kind of waiting for things to
Hmm.
build. And then when they do light me up and I am just anticipating that, that's going to help me ultimately expand, shine my light. And
Mm.
so there's way more to that than just saying, oh, I'm an Aquarius.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's so much to look in there, especially for those. I mean, because I do kind of use, obviously I talk about human design a lot more, but I do like to bring in astrology a little bit when I can. So that's a really fun new thing to explore or invitation or respond to.
Yeah, and I just want to make it really simple for everyone listening. If you're
Sure.
brand new, when you look at your human design chart, you'll see a row of numbers on the left and right. So it's that row of numbers on the right at the very top. That's your conscious sun. You'll see the sun symbol, which is a circle with a dot in the middle. So it's just the number. You don't have to worry so much about the decimal place, but that number, like minus 41, 41.3, but it's that 41 that I'm going to look at. That is 70% of my energy, and that's what I'm going to explore. So if anyone feels called to look at that, fall down that rabbit hole, that is what we're talking about.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for that. I like to bring it back to let's be like concrete. So, I want to circle back to the parenting conditioning conversation if there's anything that you have to say there, and then I'm going to ask the final question. So, um, do you have anything or do you want me to direct in a way or do you have any response to that conversation?
Yeah, I guess what I can say to start off is when it comes to parenting and like, I mean, there was a huge aspect when Ra started, talking about human design that really he was getting these downloads for parenting, right?
Oh.
Projectors are here. They're here to guide us. We need to know who the projectors are. We need to start parenting in this way to really support our children in who they are in living as they were born to be and not
Mm,
conditioning them to fit into the box of society. So I love that that's there. Karen Curry Parker took a spin a little while ago and really started promoting and advertising to parenting. So I love seeing it. But when it comes to parenting, I really find the biggest piece is the defined sacrals and the undefined sacrals
okay.
because you know conversely, the two of us, right? Me being raised by a sacral, it was like, do. Like,
Yeah.
it took a lot for my mom to finally understand that I need alone time. I need to just lie down and watch TV. She fought against it for so long. But
Mm-hmm.
no, that's when I'm going to get burnt out. That's when I start having tantrums. Like, parenting became a lot harder for her when
Mm.
I was burned out. And I would be so curious how it is for you, especially as I have two friends who are projectors who actually just like last week had a manifesting generator baby. And I'm like,
Oh.
oh, good luck to you guys because that sacral energy, like their child is going to burn them out. So,
Mm.
how can they really honor their own energy, their need for rest, get the rest that they need while honoring that their child has so much energy that they
Mm-hmm.
need to get out and they don't need rest. So how can they really balance and support that?
Mm, that's so interesting. And what I've been pondering lately is how I was raised, was was building in those rests. So like even after nap time was finished, we still had quiet time during after lunch or whatever it was. And my mom now says, she's like, mostly it was for me, which totally makes sense as a projector. And of course I enjoyed it, and of course I loved it. And then even like I'm thinking back more like longer periods of time when I was older, like summer break, when I was still in elementary school and we had summer break. I remember like we always had quiet time, and I think it was like an hour or two after lunch, I believe, and we could do whatever we wanted. Like we didn't have to sleep. We could go read, we could play with our dolls, but like we all like separated and went in our rooms or went in our own space, because it was my sister and I, and at later in life it was my step brother as well. So we would all separate and go in our own spaces, which is like such a quintessential projector thing. Now that I think about it, it makes me laugh. But what I've been pondering is that conditioning of like, I feel like I learn all of these things about manifesting generators and having the sacral energy and having the sacral, and I do have a sacral authority. Like that is actually my authority too. It's not just a defined center. Um, but like still almost needing that rest throughout the day. And I'm like, is this a condition? Like, is it just because I'm so used to it? Because actually, when I'm learning about Gens, like we have this battery and we need to deplete that battery. Yeah, it's so interesting. But everything that I was raised like quintessential. My mom only has two defined centers in her chart. So she's a projector that also has a lot of undefined centers. So a lot of time, like a lot of like I've just grown up. She needs a lot of time to herself and to get out of other people's energy. And she also is an energy worker, so even more so getting out of other people's energy. It's wild.
Ah, well, that's so great for her that she's been able to find alignment and find ways to support her own energy and get the rest that she needs. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think you made a great point that it really does come down to undefined centers, right?
Yeah.
Yes, our defined centers, yes, our type, but in terms of that resting and how do we come back to our own energy and how much time do we need?
Mm.
I know we talked about on our group call taking 15 minutes per undefined center. So you can be a manifesting generator and still, I mean, really only have two centers defined, right? If you have your sacral straight to your throat, maybe you only have those two centers and you might be
Mm.
again that does need a lot more rest. And I find I work with multiple generators with only two or three centers
Mm.
defined, and my goodness, you could mistake them as projectors
Yeah.
because they just can get burned out, especially depending on their solar plexus too, because that can be so much emotional energy that can be
Mm.
draining. So I think the solar plexus definitely plays a role. And what I've noticed more recently with my mom is that motorized throat, having an undefined throat, like just having the presence of her motorized throat burns me out. Like I need to go take a rest.
Yeah.
So I know that I've talked with other generators that feel that way from manifesting generators, because if they
Mm.
have a defined throat too, and even though it's the defined sacral, they both have that. The manifesting generator's defined throat can really tire out the generator with the undefined throat. So
Wow.
I think this is where we really do have to look at what I call the interpersonal energy dynamics
Mm.
of the centers themselves. How
Mm.
are they affecting each other? Are they both defined and you both can just sit in your own energy in that way? Or where are we undefined, absorbing the energy, mistaking it for ours, and just utterly burning out?
I love that. I was just having a conversation actually about um, looking at your partner's defined centers and your open centers. And if you have an open center and they have a defined center, looking at that and then the energy of the center. That's a really good point. And I never thought about actually the generator and the mani gen with the defined throat. That's also interesting. And I want to point out, I have met projectors where I'm working with a projector and looking at their chart, and they have so many defined centers, almost the same amount as like other mani gens that I work with, and like looking at that too, and then really like looking at focusing on the conditioning around that, because the energy of a projector, even though we have the same, maybe the same amount of defined centers, is going to be different than the energy of a mani gen, or the conditioning at least is going to
Yeah.
hit us different.
Right. To look at the conditioning within the centers themselves. I mean, there's so
Mhm.
many combinations with 9 centers, and especially as we move into the new paradigm and start to have 11 centers, like it's gonna be a whole new world we're embarking on.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that, to answer one of the first questions you asked me in our conversation about, what do I look at? It really is those
Mm.
centers. And you know, if you're in business, if this is a team member, maybe, you really want to look and see how your energy is going to be affected if you're going to be
Mm.
a lot of time with this person, and how to work together seamlessly to really complement each other. Where might you need to compromise? But also, with what you said about people pleasing, this is where we really need our own personal boundaries. Like, what
Yeah.
do I need to protect myself, my energy, so that I can function as myself and not, I used to get burned out and need like a week of recovery. So that's why
Mm.
such strong personal boundaries, especially with a defined heart, too. Um, but I need to make sure that I am meeting my own needs, especially on an energetic level,
Mm.
um, to benefit the relationship too.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's where we really can get in, get into the, like, it's not selfish. I'm actually taking care of myself too, to better be
Yes,
able to support
this
you.
is this is a need,
Yeah.
not a want.
Yes. Yeah. And really defining those for yourself, and using your human design chart to explore that
Yes,
and how that feels. I love that. So many conversations we could have.
I know.
I want to close with what has, I love how in the beginning you shared human design found me rather than I found human design. So I'm curious, what has human design, like, maybe what is one of the biggest things that human design has gifted you in life, in relationship? Let's go with relationship, since we kind of had that theme. What has human design gifted you?
I think it's really gifted me the opportunity to embrace my authentic self. Um,
Mm.
because before I was, trying to please everyone,
Yeah.
really, especially as a projector, I was trying to keep up energetically, trying to make everyone happy, trying to be for everyone, trying to
Mm.
guide everyone and give unsolicited advice to only be met with bitterness.
Yep.
Feel like really exploring my human design helped me to let go of what I'm not, but especially, like, I mean, gosh, this is a whole nother conversation we can have about emotional authorities, because really embracing what it means to be an emotional authority. Half of the world, nobody, it seems like nobody is talking about this. This is why I love talking about it.
Mm.
Um, because it's really helped me honor my emotions and
Yeah.
authentically be in my emotions. Like, just to give a quick example, I went away this weekend and I drove to meet my friend so that we could get in his car and drive, 2.5 hours. And I had just gotten off a call with an old friend catching up, and I'm just about to jump into his car to go. And something in me was like, whoa, like, you just need a minute. Like,
Mm.
there's emotions going through your body and you need to honor them. So I just, said to him, I just need a minute. I closed the door, I leaned against the car, and I just burst out crying. And I was like, oh, this is the emotional release. Knowing my emotional wave, I hit a ratchet, I was just going down, and I just had to honor and authentically be me
Yeah.
in those moments. Luckily, my friend completely understands who I am, where I am, what
Yeah.
I needed. Um, but I really sitting with that and reflecting on it was like, wow, like go me. Like I did what I needed to do. I was authentic in that moment. I didn't try to say, oh, I just have to get in the car because we gotta go. Like,
Yeah.
no, I was able to meet my needs. And like, I don't even want to think about what the days would have been like had I not gotten that emotional release. I probably would have lashed out at him. Like, we probably wouldn't have had a good time together, a
Mhm.
good relationship in that sense.
Yeah.
But letting that out, I had the most wonderful time and got those emotions out so that I could just, find the joy in
Mm.
everything. So yeah, so much authentic expression.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a permission slip. And I agree with you. We do need to talk about emotional authorities more often because it's over 50% of the population is an emotional authority. For me, where I see that playing in my life, the biggest place that it played in my life was the permission to be interested in so many different things at once. Like, especially coming from a projector mom, my mom would always say, Hannah, you spin so many plates at one time and it's too much because it is too much for her. It's not too much for me. And when I got my first full-time job, I went to school, I got my master's degree, I got my first like dream full-time job working a 9 to 5 in a hospital. And I'm like, this is sucking the life out of me. Like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And I couldn't understand at that time why. I didn't
Mhm.
understand why, like, everyone else, quote, air quotes, like everyone else can do this 9 to 5 situation. Why is it so, like, why does it feel like I'm going against the grain? Why does it feel so out of alignment? I wouldn't have used that word at that time, but why does it feel so out of alignment for me? And when I learned human design, it was like permission slip after permission slip after permission slip. And the last thing I want to say with projectors, with my mom, a lot of her, I hope this is okay for me to share this about her. A lot of her life, she's felt, well, because, and I'm sharing this because I feel like this will align with projectors, especially, but with everyone. A lot of her life, she felt misplaced and like too sensitive, and like, why do I get so overwhelmed and overstimulated where other people don't get overwhelmed and overstimulated? And why do I need, and my mom, I'm so proud of her for taking so much time to honor herself, even though there was a lot of like questioning and uncertainty there, but she continued to take that time for herself and separate herself from that energy because she knew innately, like that defined spleen, like she knew she needed it. But there was so much shame and guilt around it, and like so much just not knowing why, like so much questioning and feeling so different and out of place. And especially with projectors, like we do, I hear that all the time with projectors, like they want to live like generators or mani-gens because that's 70% of the population, that's the majority, but you're not created to have that full Energizer Bunny battery all the time. And so human design, it, like every time I share a little snippet with her, she's like, I wish that I knew this earlier, Hannah. Like this would have saved me so much pain and heartache and grief. Like I wish that I would have known this earlier. And I love sharing it with her because I see these, like I'm sure with your clients too. And this is just my mom, but like you see all these things like click and like line up in people's brains, and witnessing that. That's, oh my gosh, that's like the biggest heart explosion ever because we don't need to put ourselves in so many boxes. We put ourselves in so many boxes. And like, if we're, oh my gosh, if we're like hanging out with so many projectors and you're a Manny Jen and you feel so different, like it's knowing that. And that's the one line in me. I think it's knowing that, like, okay, we're just different. We're just different and my energy works differently. It doesn't mean that we can't hang out together and we can't thrive together. It's navigating. It's having a roadmap of how to navigate rather than you're just navigating blindly.
Yeah, and I feel like, having my strategy to be recognized, really sitting with that for years. What does it feel like to be recognized? Because I didn't even allow myself to be. And then as
Mm,
I'm really honoring it and I'm like, recognize me, like I need to be recognized, I'm
yeah,
really noticing everyone longs to be recognized. Projectors really need to be recognized so we know who's essentially like worthy of our energy so that we
mm,
can say yes to those invitations, right? We need to be recognized and then receive those invitations.
yeah,
But regardless of your type, you want to be recognized for who you authentically are.
mm,
And human design gives us the blueprint, gives us all those permission slips to be
yeah,
ourselves so that then we can find the people who really recognize us for us and
yeah,
not just the boxes that we put ourselves in to try to
mm,
fit in society and please everyone.
mm, yeah. Couldn't agree more. So go learn your human design. go, go, go look up your chart. Have a
And the
conversation.
fact I always say to people, the fact that it's free, like
Yeah.
it's a free chart. When human design first found me, what, 4.5 years ago, there wasn't much online. Like
Mm,
I read everything that I could find. And
yeah.
now, like there is so much, everybody's talking about it, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all kind of on the bandwagon. So
Yeah.
so much to explore. And again, it's all free if
Yeah.
it lights you up to explore that. If not, coaches, readings, all the other ways to align.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many different opportunities. There's so many. So please share. It's all in the description box below, but please share where people can continue learning you and learning with you. Where do you hang out most as well?
Yeah, I mostly hang out on Instagram. You can follow me at the Vital Jen, and everything information wise about what I do, how to work with me, all the things that we've talked about here, you can find on my website, which is divinevitalitywithjen.com.
Love it. You do really great Instagram lives too. So speaking of like free information, not just like clickbaity reels, you do really great lives too. So make sure you go ahead on Instagram, follow her, check out her information. Thank you so much for coming. This was such a fun conversation. I love getting into like the nitty gritty. I love just talking to someone that has a lot of knowledge with human design. So this was really fun. This was very informative. Thank you for coming. It's an honor to have a conversation with you and to have you on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's been a pleasure talking with you and being here.